I'm here to talk about some of my experiences as an artist, or rather as someone who would like to be understood as an artist. By that I mean somebody who has had fantasies about the state of being an artist, or at least somebody who tries to be an artist. Well, in truth, someone who now and again I've pretended to be an artist. So one thing I'm going to do tonight, there's going to be two it's this an art school, so the idea of showing you how to make paint's sort of stupid really, because maybe there's quite a few of you who already know. Nonetheless, I thought a couple of demonstrations, some of you might not know, and so I'm going to show you how to make paint, and really then a range of short stories, and they're all sort of about, even the paint, they're sort of about sensing sight. And the paint making's not a distraction, it's actually got themes. So it's got a theme around the physical environment and themes around the human environment. So that's a tube of paint, obviously, and it's made out of bricks. You can feel these. So what I've done is, this is me and a woman called Maxine. We spent quite a long time sanding down bricks to get the dust off the brick, and then pulverising the dust to make something as fine as pigment, if we could, and then mixing it to see. So it took about 3 years or something like that. But the nice thing is that the bricks themselves, these three are from one brick from my studio. So actually taking the physical environment of my studio, and obviously there's a hole in the wall now where the brick was, but then I've made it into this tube of paint, and then I thought, really, if we sanded it, then we could actually control the shape that was coming out of the brick. So there's more reasons for doing it than just having the dust. So that's one of them. And then, because where I live, there's a lot of red brick. That's another one. That's a softer one. That's a softer one there. And they're, and it used to be, there used to be a brick making industry in the town. And there they are. They've got me 2 tubes of brick paint that are, it really doesn't work, unfortunately. So it's what's actually happened now. It took about, like I say, it took quite a long time to collect enough of the stuff, and then we mixed it up, and then we tried painting with it, and it was pretty shit, really. And then over the years, it's turned into this really quite hard. So to give you a bit of something. Oh, there it is. So if you want to, that's one of them, if you like, in paint form, and you can get a sense of the material. And if you get to feel that, now, what I've actually invented is a new material, a building material, which is really hard and really durable and can last for a very long time, and it's made out of bricks and oil paint sort of thing. So it's not very practical. It took about a year to collect the dust from one brick. But if we can ever get to a point where we can sort of speed things up a little bit, very good way of recycling bricks. Me and Maxine, that's a mate of mine who does a lot of this work, we started collecting environmental colour. We had a Year of the Artist commission in 2001, I think it was. And then, and from that, then we had an architect contacted us. They were doing some regeneration work in Salford, building a big new building. And they wanted us to do some research about the local area. You know, the sort of thing. Consultation, they call it, but they don't necessarily mean consultation because they don't actually want to know what people think. They just want you to do that engagement thing. So, so we had a whole load of us did different things, and me and Max collected a load of colour from the environment. We had a system for doing it. It wasn't just random. The system was random, but you know, it had a logic to it. And of course, it's Salford, is this, so a lot of the buildings, particularly the residential buildings, are made out of red brick. And of course, what they're doing in regeneration is knocking down all that stuff, that red brick stuff, and they're building all this other stuff that isn't red brick. So you sort of effectively change the nature of the city. So we spent some time wandering around, chatting to people, photographing things, taking colour cues. Are they called colour cues? You know, where you got your little piece of electronic device and you whack it on there and it tells you what colour and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, in the end, we actually narrowed it down and we made some domestic interior paint. The idea being that you could paint your, well, I better go back actually one, because one of the things about these colours, even though they're red brick, some of them aren't the brick colour, some of them are the colour of the paint that sits on top of the brick. So very regularly, about 50% of the houses in that part of Salford, they paint the house, which is red brick, if you know what I mean. So, which is a lovely, lovely concept. So what we did is we invented some interior paints so that you could paint the inside of the house the same colour as the outside of the house, which made some sense to us. Nobody did it, except the architect. The architect, they did. They liked it very much, and they designed this building with the idea of the colour range on the building and inside the building, completely wrapped around it. So I'm trying to condense some of my thinking about what it is to be a practitioner in terms of research. And I have these little diagrams I do on the back of beer mats. This one's in my little notebook. And I guess, like Susan said, what I've come down to is that the process bit is the important bit. So practitioner, or as in whoever that is, doing lots and lots of different things because you can't define yourself by one practice. And then, but actually at the core of that are some processes that repeat themselves. And coming out of those processes are actual things. And they might be forms, and it might be wisdom, and it might be different forms of disciplinary insight, interdisciplinary insight. It might be that there's a presence, a sort of public exposure, and it might be impact. This is part of an initiative, a chair relocation initiative. So basically going to people's houses and taking chairs and then relocating them in the environment so that you had a different, you know, obviously, therefore, when you sit in the chair, you've got a particular perspective, and it's my choice where that chair sits. So pointing it away from the landscape or away from the normal vista that people would appreciate. You know, this is an area of Italy that has got a tourist industry, and therefore a lot of the landscape is stuff that you look at and admire and spend time dwelling on your own personal thoughts while you're looking at it. Because the landscape's quite overpowering. So the other thing I did, this is me as product designer, not urban planner. I made some sunglasses where you were protecting your eyes from not just the sun, but from the landscape itself. So they're completely blacked out, those sunglasses. You can't see a thing through them. And the really nice thing about that is that the blackout is charcoal. So, and because one of the things they make in the region is charcoal, because the hills, the mountains in that part of Italy, a lot of trees, very good place to make timber, to produce timber, to distribute timber, except that timber's heavy. So the industry that grew up in the area was charcoal, because if you burn the wood before you send it off, it's quite lightweight, and therefore you can load more onto a donkey. And they still do that. So the idea was to sort of line the glasses with charcoal so you couldn't see the overpowering landscape, and then you can smell the charcoal kilns while you're wearing the glasses, which seemed to be a fairly powerful experience. So we've made a colour chart for the town where I live. And then you get all that stuff, because like my dad were born there, and my granddad were born there, and his great-granddad, and all that sort of business. So then you get all these embarrassing conversations in the pub, which turn out to be not that embarrassing in the end. Turn out to be quite sweet, because everybody's talking about colour in the environment. And it's fairly obvious, but we collected, I think when we were looking in the first instance, we collected something like 3,800 colours. And then we had like a voting system, where you could vote for your favourite colours. You know, like local people would vote for the favourite colours. And the top 12, we had one lot of 6 that were like dyes for textile. The idea being you could make clothes that would, you know, camouflage you in the environment. And then the colours, again, we want people to paint their houses the same colour as the environment. Still an idea that I like. But then we had the vote thing, and we said, like, top 12, of everybody votes, top 12, that'll be the colour scheme that we go to production with. Anyway, everybody likes it, and they use it for local arts festival branding committee and all that sort of stuff. And one of the local fashion designers, and my daughter did that. But one of the local fashion designers has been making dresses that you can wear on country walks and all that sort of business, you know. So this is an app that me and Maxine's did it, because I'm not very good at technology, but Maxine's made an app called Colourground, which you can download off the App Store. And it's a way of creating a mass observation about colour around the world. So at the moment, the website's a bit down at the moment, because we haven't really got enough money to keep the website going, but this is an old picture of it. There's 3 times the number of people using it now as there were then, and it goes all over the world. It's got China and Korea and all over this. So without publicising it, people have started to use it, and it's starting to gain a bit of a pace, you know what I mean? And from that, you can find your own colour scheme for your own landscape. Yeah. I'm going to pick on a volunteer. I just want to tell. Sorry. I'm going to pick on you, if that's all right. I've got to do it like this. It's a different story now. We've finished talking about colour now, really. What are you called? John. Limeside's a housing estate in North Manchester in Oldham. So they got me and my mate, who were both called themselves artists, to go down to the estate and do stuff there on the estate with local people to help them to get accommodated with the Tenants Association, because they wanted to do things that the Tenants Association would approve of, but their consultation practices had basically crumbled. So they had to go down, and the best they could think of was to send a couple of artists down there, right? Okay, so I'm going to let you go in a minute, because I know this is intensely embarrassing. The point is about that we set us there for 3 weeks. We were there for 3 years, and then I went back 25 years later, and they were still doing the stuff that we'd originally talked to them about. So that's the story as far as you're concerned. This is just a short story now thinking about that human agency. And it's not my story. It's a story about a couple of blokes who, for a short moment in time, about 4 or 5 years, ran a Tenants and Residents Association in Salford, strangely enough, in Islington, in Salford. And these are a couple of tower blocks that have been, ignored, I suppose, over quite a long period of time. So they were built in the 1960s, and this particular campaign was about trying to get a renewal for a refurbishment. What we found out was this. We were supposed to find out good practice in the management of resources in high-rise living, and good practices in local governance, and good practices in engagement. What we found out is that housing is an economic weapon. It's an instrument of social control. You can read for yourself. The third P, you get the third P? Okay, the third P is to do with this one at the bottom, options for cultural isolation. The third P is the reference to Blackpool, when they built Blackpool Pier in the first instance. They built Blackpool Pier because poor people had started having holidays in Blackpool. And if poor people were having holidays in Blackpool, it meant rich people had to spend time with poor people, so they built the pier. And they could use the pier exclusively without being bothered by poor people. And then guess what? The poor people saved up enough money so they could use the pier. So then they built a second pier, exclusive to the first pier, so they wouldn't have to mix with poor people again. So housing's become our third pier. It's become the space where people who've got average to low resources can't occupy that space. What have I done with my thing? So that's our presentation. When they all came to Salford, Hessel's did other presentations and stuff, and me and Kevin did this one. And this was just really a presentation about the social environment on the estate. So we collected together bits of evidence and stuff like that about confronting stereotypes and the stuff that had gone on in the last 3 years, rebuilding practices and habits to do with street parties and to do with convivial living, sharing food, that type of thing. Sharing food, obviously, very good example of how to save fuel. If you all cook together, you're only using one cooker. If everybody's cooking in different flats, they're using 70 cookers, that type of thing. So, these were sort of practices they'd built up. And at the time, the UK's wealthiest individual had a net worth of £6.85 billion. In summary, I have to say, I've just gone through a whole load of projects that didn't work. So actually, your summary of all this is, it's sort of nonsense. As a researcher, I actually am not very good at it. Nothing worked. I mean, I found out things along the way. As an activist, I've tended to lie to people in the end without knowing it. And then as an artist, I actually don't do anything anymore. I just sort of be with people and represent them at council meetings and stuff like that. I don't know anything, I don't do anything, I don't make anything. And I think that's quite a liberating position to be in. These are the sort of ideas and thoughts that are in my head now. And they're basic, but I think they take a lot of time to answer. And actually, two themes I suppose I've touched on is, one is time, and the other one is very long time. Anyway, first one is, what is it that we are calling art in the first instance? Because actually most of my encounters have been with people who wouldn't use that word. Quite difficult to work this one out, particularly when you start the process, you don't know what you're doing. In some cases, we get to the end of the process, we still don't know what we're doing. But the who does what and why is a big one. Because the motivations are the definition. You know, like that story about the local authority suddenly admitting that they were there for the money. It would have been nice to know that at the beginning. Could have cut out a lot of effort. I mean, we did get the re-improvements to the flats, don't get me wrong, but, you know. And the last one is really a question about what we understand by the word democracy, I suppose, because actually all of us, in the end, become isolated by our individual choices. So can we collectivise our behaviours? So can we create an environment for sustained democracy and critical citizenship? So I've got those ingredients. And this is my skin. It's fairly fine already, but I think probably I'm going to just try and get it a bit finer. Oh, it stinks. Yeah, I'm sort of interested to know what colour I was, if you know what I mean. And then, you know, maybe I'll find time. I've already asked Keith Piper if he'll do it, and he said, yeah. So I've yet to sort of see him actually shave any skin off himself, but, you know, I think it's sort of an interesting question. So I haven't necessarily told you about everything I do. Well, I haven't told you about everything I do. I've told you about very little of what I do. But the point is that, in the end, they all combine together. And somehow they all make a logical sense. So even if it doesn't look like it at the time, and one day you're doing something, you know, painting in the studio, and one day you seem to be doing something completely different, actually, they do actually combine, and they do make sense to each other in the end. I think that was what Susan was saying right at the beginning about the way that we adopt processes and move between processes as a way of exploring our own agency and looking at the way that we function within life, both as cultural activists, but also as people who've got social lives that extend beyond the family. I mean, in a way, it's a sort of pursuit of failure, if you want to be absolutely honest about it, you know, going for those things that you know. So we've just completed, and we have actually completed it, a sculpture of a woman activist in Manchester who's been responsible for leading campaigns to reduce gun crime in South Manchester, in Moss Side. And that's taken us 9 years. That's me and my wife. And I mean, the processes are unbelievable, you know, like how to get the gun metal from the police down to the foundry, that type of thing. How much security is involved, what the police need to do to coordinate that, how they, you know, you can only use certain guns, and then shocking stuff, which everybody knows, but until you encounter it, you don't know it well enough. So once you've actually got to the point where Imma's sculpture's been made, after 9 years, we've managed to get her into the town hall in Manchester. So she's the first sculpture of a woman to appear in a public space in Manchester other than Queen Victoria. I think that's shocking, frankly. And we put her in the town hall. Obviously, she's a black woman. And the first thing that happens to her, somebody moved her around so she was facing the wall. Now, you know, all right, if I read it in a newspaper, I'd go, oh, white people. But when you encounter it, then I think it's quite, it's quite, but you can't treat that as failure. She wouldn't, she's amazing. She wouldn't treat that as failure, she would treat that as proof that she's doing something right, and she would treat that as evidence that we have to go further, you know. It's completely, I mean, obviously they burn the clay. I mean, actually, weirdly enough, I'm not being funny, I'm not going to stick my nose in there now, but when you put the brick dust in there and do all that, you get the smell of the kiln. Because obviously the brick dust, you can't make pigment out of brick dust, it's a stupid idea, and we knew that when we started. Because it won't absorb, I mean, it won't matter what it won't do it. You know, so you can try it if you want. Anyway, thank you everybody, and what have you been a lovely audience. Thank you.